Welcome to a conversation with the Right Honourable Brandon Lewis, CBE MP, UK Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Please welcome our host, Dr. Nile Gardiner, Director of Heritage's Margaret Thatcher Centre for Freedom and Bernard and Barbara Lomas Fellow.
Great. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and it's a great pleasure to be here at the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C. This afternoon to welcome the UK Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Brandon Lewis, who's a very good friend of ours. And Brandon has been a Member of Parliament since 2010. I believe that you are the longest continuously serving British minister, alongside Liz Truss, if not mistaken. So
I think that's right. Yes.
Yes. So very distinguished record of service for the British government and for the British people. And you've been in Washington for the last few days, holding a series of meetings with U.S. government officials, also with members of Congress as well, at a very important time, I think, in terms of US-UK relations, an important time in terms of the relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom, but also the European Union as well. And so many issues on the agenda. And Northern Ireland has been at the very heart of the present negotiations between London and Brussels in the post-Brexit era. And so I'll be asking a series of questions with regard to both the situation in Northern Ireland, but also in terms of big picture foreign policy as well, Brandon. And but the opening question I'm going to ask you, with the Academy Awards in 2 weeks' time, Oscar ceremony, I think March 29th, the film Belfast, which is a tremendous film, which really speaks to the heart and spirit of the people of Northern Ireland. Could you talk about Belfast actually and the importance of that film and what that means for the people of Northern Ireland?
Absolutely. It's a film that will be indelibly marked on my mind for a long time, partly because it is a fabulous film, and I would encourage anybody who hasn't seen it to watch it, and partly because I was very fortunate to be at the premiere which we had with the Belfast Film Festival in early November last year, the date of which will stick in my mind for a long time, because within a couple of days I came down with COVID straight after seeing the film. But it is an amazing film, and it does give... it's beautifully shot, actually, and even at the beginning it sort of transcends from the modern-day Belfast back into how Belfast was at the time of the Troubles, even going into a sort of black and white kind of style. But I think it really does encapsulate in a brilliant way the complexity of what happened through the Troubles. How the armed forces came to be in Northern Ireland, what they were doing there, and what it was like as a family just to be there in a way that's... I think it's very moving, and it's just beautifully shot, and it's fantastic that they're winning BAFTAs, and I'm very hopeful that we're going to see a Northern Irish win at the Oscars. And Kenneth Branagh's a very proud Northern Irish man, and Northern Ireland's very lucky to have such great talent like Kenneth Branagh and many others, Liam Neeson and others. So yeah, we're all fingers crossed for the Oscars.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film, and I did see it in the cinema when it was released in the United States back in November, and I think it's one of the best British films of the last couple of decades. So best of luck to Belfast at the Academy Awards in a couple of weeks time. And moving over to the political world, Brandon, this week has seen some interventions by US political figures with regard to the Northern Ireland Protocol. And with regard to the big picture on Brexit, Nancy Pelosi made some remarks last night that were reported in the British press, where she spoke about a US-UK trade deal. She made some statements that were deemed to be, I would say, quite controversial on the UK side, and she linked a US-UK trade deal with the issue of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And she said that if there was any inkling of any undermining the Good Friday Agreement, there would be no US-UK trade deal. Now, of course, the British government has made it abundantly clear that there is no threat to the Good Friday Agreement. But could you talk further about this? It is extraordinary. You have the the Speaker of the House of Representatives weighing in on this, not for the first time, of course, but it is an intervention that I would see myself as quite unhelpful coming from the US side. But over to you, Secretary of State, on this particular issue. So that's the opening.
It's quite a shift from the Belfast movie straight
Yes.
into the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Yes.
Very fair question. Obviously, I was with Nancy Pelosi for the Speaker's lunch yesterday, which showed off some of the phenomenal talent that we have in Ireland, actually, as well as some of the entertainment she arranged from the Riverdance team, which is fabulous. But look, on the Northern Ireland Protocol and on that wider issue around the Good Friday Agreement, my point has always been, and actually, obviously, the UK government's point has always been, we absolutely are committed to the Good Friday Agreement. And actually, the work we have been doing and the position we are taking is absolutely about protecting the Good Friday Agreement. And the challenge that we have at the moment is that the implementation and the outworkings of the Northern Ireland Protocol are having a really damaging effect on the Good Friday Agreement. And that's in the sense that the Good Friday Agreement obviously has three strands. It has the North-South, the East-West, and Northern Ireland itself, the institutions. And the institutions are obviously under pressure. The DUP have withdrawn their First Minister. So we no longer have a First Minister or a Deputy First Minister, so that's putting that under stress. The North-South is under stress because there's what's called the North-South Ministerial Council that hasn't been sitting because of the tensions of the protocol and how the unionist parties have responded to that. And also East-West is under pressure because products are unable to move. We've got over 200 companies in Great Britain unable to supply in Northern Ireland. So what we are focused on is absolutely about protecting the Good Friday Agreement in all three of its strands. The EU are absolutely understandably focused on the single market. We respect that. But for us, it's about the Good Friday Agreement whilst respecting their single market. We want to make sure that the people of Northern Ireland, for the whole community of Northern Ireland and the businesses, can get access to the goods and products they've always been able to access, the goods and products that are being transferred within and used and consumed within the United Kingdom, that are not at risk of going into the EU. And that's where we think there's a landing ground that can work. And we want to see some flexibility from the EU to facilitate that to protect the Good Friday Agreement.
Yes, and do you think that is a message that the Biden presidency is beginning to grasp, actually? And it's an important message, and that is the reality on the ground there, that there is no prospect of undermining the Good Friday Agreement here. And is that a message you think sinking in with the administration here in Washington?
Well, I'm obviously somewhat biased. I've been talking to the administration. I'd like to think the administration do know that, and the president, even in the events yesterday, was talking about, and I think he referred to his friend, the Prime Minister, and their conversation around the Good Friday Agreement. I think they do know we are absolutely committed to the Good Friday Agreement, and as I say, all the work we've been doing in order to try and rectify the problems of the protocol is about ensuring that the very thing that was designed and intended to protect the Good Friday Agreement, but is currently undermining it, that it doesn't actually do damage to it. We want to actually refine, fix, and deal with those issues in the protocol so that the Good Friday Agreement itself is fully protected. And look, colleagues I speak to here and friends in the US, in the administration and on the Hill, are all consistent, and rightly so, about their attachment to, strength of feeling for and support for the Good Friday Agreement. And we absolutely share that. So yes, a lot of my conversations is around explaining that is exactly what we're looking at doing, and why these changes to the protocol, or to fix these problems with the protocol, is so important. And this is a negotiation between the UK and the EU. And I understand the US's great interest in it because of their attachment to Northern Ireland and the Good Friday Agreement. And look, prosperity is a key part of peace in Northern Ireland. American inward investment from the US has always played a big part in that. The amount of US companies invested in Northern Ireland is fantastic. So I understand them having an interest in that, and we want to negotiate a settlement with the EU. But ultimately, we also need to make sure that we get a resolution that works for the people of Northern Ireland, and as I say, protects and delivers on the Good Friday Agreement in all three strands.
Yes. And so the issue of the Northern Ireland Protocol has become, a significant area of political focus in the United Kingdom. It's a big issue for British Conservatives. It's an issue for the Conservative Party. And many British Conservatives feel very strongly that the British government has to really stand up to the European Union on this issue. and the EU, most notably, I would say the French and Emmanuel Macron have been, very vociferous on this matter. The French, I would describe their position as not exactly the most, gracious or helpful on this issue. What is your, your message in terms of how the British are going to approach the ongoing discussions with the European Union? What stance is the UK going to take? Is the UK prepared to be very robust in standing up to European Union pressure on this? Also, in your view, is the EU divided somewhat on the issue of the Northern Ireland Protocol, or are we seeing a sort of united front from the European Union in terms of how they're approaching this?
Well, obviously, our dealings are, in terms of the negotiations, the Foreign Secretary leads the negotiations, and I've been fortunate enough to work with great people on the protocol from the Northern Ireland point of view, where obviously Michael Gove and Lord Frost and now Liz Truss, all of whom have been very focused around and working very closely with my team around ensuring that we understand and we're focused on what works for Northern Ireland. And the Foreign Secretary is very much in that space. And that's where our focus is on. And I would say, look, in dealing with the EU, they have the mandate, and Maros Šefčovič, who's the Vice President there dealing with this, has this mandate. And I've said too, and we've made the point, we've got to look beyond that mandate and look in an imaginative and practical and flexible way to find resolutions to basically the problems that the implementation is causing, whereby so many checks, so much bureaucracy is on goods that are moving just within the United Kingdom, in effect. That's meant that now we've got over 200 businesses in mainland Great Britain not supplying Northern Ireland. That's unfair and wrong for the businesses and consumers in Northern Ireland. Now, I actually do think, I found Maros Šefčovič, he's a very nice guy. I think he's very genuine about wanting to find a way through this, but obviously he's working within a particular mandate he has got from the 27 member states. We want, and we're asking the EU to just show some more flexibility and pragmatism in finding a resolution and a landing ground. We think there is a sensible landing ground, actually, that separates out these goods that are at risk and from the goods that are not at risk, which is by far the majority. To find a way through that. Look, I can't speak to every single individual member state, and particularly at the moment in the context of what we're dealing with globally with Putin's abhorrence with his invasion in Ukraine, I think is again a stark reminder of where that cliche is so true, that there's so much more that brings us together than divides us. And actually we should be, and we would hope that you will see some importance in showing flexibility to get a resolution for this issue so we can all focus on these hugely important global issues. But that shouldn't undermine or underestimate the importance for the sovereign UK government to make sure we are doing the right thing by citizens of the United Kingdom who live in Northern Ireland as well.
Yes. And with regard to to Article 16 of the Northern Ireland Protocol, and again, an issue of significant sort of political interest in the United Kingdom. There's been a lot of press coverage of this matter. Do the delays in using Article 16 of the Northern Ireland Protocol mean the British government is reluctant to use it? Has the moment passed for using it, or does that remain on the table?
Oh, absolutely, it remains on the table. I mean, we're of the view, and I've said this before publicly, as have others in government, that we think the legal threshold was met to trigger Article 16 in the summer of last year, around the time that we published our command paper, which we think set out a pathway to resolve things. The reason we haven't triggered Article 16, I would make the argument, it shows our bona fides, if you like, around the fact we are determined to strain every last sinew and do everything we can to find a solution by agreement. And for the long term, a solution that's agreed between us and the EU as partners is going to have more certainty, which is good at sustainability, which is good for Northern Ireland, particularly good for businesses who want legal certainty as well. Triggering Article 16 is part of the protocol, so if we can't get a resolution, it is absolutely on the table as the step we would need to take, and that starts another process, which is why, as I say, we will continue to strain every sinew, and the Prime Minister is absolutely determined to try and do everything we can to get an agreement, but it's got to be one that works for Northern Ireland and for the UK as much as one that protects the single market, and in doing so defends and protects and builds on the success of the Good Friday Agreement, as I say, in all of its strands, because At the moment, that just isn't what's happening. We do need to seize a bit more flexibility from the EU around being pragmatic around a solution. I would make the point, if you look at the protocol and you read the opening sort of sections of the protocol, it refers to not disrupting the everyday lives of people in their communities. It refers to protecting state functions. Well, supplying medicines is a pretty important state function. Disrupting everyday lives of communities, arguably that failure to be able to get products to citizens, that's being breached. The internal market of the UK is definitely being breached in terms of these businesses that can't transfer because of bureaucracy. All strands of the Good Friday Agreement, well, I've already explained the north-south, east-west issues, let alone the institutional threats now, and the protection of the single market. And that's the one thing that hasn't been under threat. So there's 4 key areas of the 5, I would argue, that the implementation of the protocol is putting at risk or is breaking. And we need to resolve that. And that's in the long-term interest, not just of Northern Ireland as part of the UK, but actually of the EU as well.
Yes, yes. And so the Prime Minister is determined really to stand up for British interests here and to fight his ground.
Well, and it comes back to this key point. Remember, for a lot of people, there's a lot of people who voted to leave the European Union. They did it for lots of different reasons. I represent the 5th highest Leave vote constituency in the United Kingdom, and I know my constituents had strong views on this. For a lot of people, leaving the European Union was about re-establishing the sovereignty of the United Kingdom. And in doing that, that means we've got to stand up for, and we will stand up for the citizens of the United Kingdom, wherever in it they may live.
Yes, and so it's clearly a priority matter for the Prime Minister.
Absolutely.
Yes. With regard to the upcoming May 5th Northern Ireland Assembly elections, this is a very significant election in many respects. Sinn Féin, of course, a big factor in all this. What happens if Sinn Féin ends up as the biggest party actually in the May 5th Northern Ireland Assembly? What is the impact of that? Will institutions be suspended or even collapse with the depth of course, opposition among unionists to Sinn Féin with its long track record of association with the Irish Republican Army? What do you see as the consequence of that scenario?
Well, look, I think it'd be dangerous as somebody who used to be chairman of the Conservative Party went through a couple of elections. It's always dangerous as a politician to prejudge an election you're taking part in, let alone one where, effectively, as the Secretary of State, I'm an observer. So I don't know what the outcome of the election will be. In a few weeks, May the 5th, we'll know that. From my point of view as Secretary of State, whoever wins the election, I think all parties that take part in an election on the promise to their constituents they will represent them. And therefore, if they take part in the election, whatever the outcome, they should fulfil the roles that and in Northern Ireland with power sharing, that means all the parties coming to the table and the 2 lead parties, the Lead Party for Nationalism, Lead Party for Unionism, nominating the first and deputy first minister, depending on where they stand. I think whoever comes first and second, they should do that. And I'll be very clear about that. If you're going to take part in democracy, you take part in democracy. So I think that is important. From a UK government point of view, whoever is first and deputy first minister is a choice of the voters of Northern Ireland. Our job is to work with them as UK government, working with the devolved authority, the Northern Ireland Executive, to get the best things for Northern Ireland. I'm very proud of the fact that as Secretary of State, I've overseen this year the biggest devolution settlement for Northern Ireland since devolution began financially. That's on top of huge investments, the biggest investments in decades we've seen in infrastructure, some of the arguably biggest financial packages for city and growth deals to boost the economy. New deal, 400 million of money to go in to support the growth of the economy in Northern Ireland. All of these things we've delivered over the last couple of years, despite having to work through COVID. And we will do that with the executive, whoever is the first and deputy first minister. And my focus will always be on doing that in a way that works for the people of Northern Ireland, regardless of the parties. As I say, these elections are going to be fascinating elections. I think the big sort of elephant in the room in that sense of the outcome of the elections and the challenges we might see after May the 5th actually comes back to the Northern Ireland Protocol. Because I think it's, bearing in mind that the DUP have withdrawn their First Minister already over the protocol, I think it's, my concern is what happens after May the 5th if we don't have a resolution on the protocol. And if the EU are not showing any flexibility, I think that does put things at risk. We've updated the rules and the law around the executive now, so the other ministers can carry on. So at the moment, the executive is still functioning, just without an FM and a DFM, but that causes challenges for new big decisions like passing a budget, which they'll need to do after the election. So I do worry about that in the context of the impact that the protocol's having on unionism and unionism's sense of identity and sense of fairness in how the institutions work. But from our point of view, whoever is First Minister or Deputy First Minister nominate, they should nominate, and we will work with them.
One further question on Northern Ireland before switching to sort of big picture foreign policy. So the Northern Ireland Protocol, I understand, disappears if there's a negative vote in the Northern Ireland Assembly in 2024, if not mistaken. Why, in that case, why doesn't the British government just put a good alternative on the table and start campaigning for a no vote now?
Well, it's a long way off to be campaigning for 2024, yes. And I did see one of my colleagues wrote an article along these lines over the last week or two. But as I say, look, from our point of view, it's about fight. Look, we managed to secure a trade deal, the TCA, the wider trade deal with the EU, which came after the protocol, actually, just a couple of weeks later, but it came after the protocol, back at the end of 2020. And that works, and that's working very well. So it has to be possible that we can find the common ground to find a way to land things for the protocol so that we can get it working in the way it was always intended, that actually would work for the people of Northern Ireland, won't therefore damage the sense of identity that unionism has. And I think one of the things we have to recognise is that issue about identity is real for unionism in Northern Ireland, and we have to respect that, and we've got to find a way through this. But also understanding, I think, and one of the things that gets lost a bit, because the debate is often around unionism's actions in terms of the DUP withdrawing First Minister and unionism's comments on this, all parties in Northern Ireland are clear there are problems with the protocol. And when you talk to the business community, pretty much every sector of the business community, with very small exceptions, is clear that there are problems with the protocol or that it doesn't work, and we need to find ways through this. So this is not just a political issue for the UK government. This is a very practical issue for communities on the ground in Northern Ireland. When I met the leaders of the Jewish community, which is it's a small, vulnerable, but historic community in Northern Ireland, they make the point that under the EU's rules, technically, they can't practice their religion. They can't access kosher food from Great Britain, where they've always got it from. They can't get access to the artifacts they need for their ceremonies. That is just not sustainable. It's not right, morally or ethically, and I'm sure that's not where the EU wants to be either. So if we can see some flexibility and pragmatism, I think there is a landing ground. We will strain, as I say, every sinew to get to that point, and the Foreign Secretary is working hard with her team to do that, and our teams work together on this, and the Prime Minister is determined to make sure that ultimately we do what is right for the people of Northern Ireland, and in doing so, we protect the Good Friday Agreement.
Thank you very much for those very detailed answers to some tough questions on Northern Ireland. Now trying to switch over to some more big picture foreign policy issues, and of course the Ukraine crisis is dominating the political landscape on both sides of the Atlantic. It's the number one issue facing, of course, the United Kingdom and the United States at this time. And from the vantage point of Washington, I have to say that British leadership on the Ukraine issue has been outstanding and has been far more effective, wide-ranging, and impactful as opposed to leadership from other European countries such as France and Germany, and certainly British leadership has eclipsed that of the European Union with regard to Ukraine. And I would say that Boris Johnson has earned a great deal of admiration over here in the United States with regard to his leadership and handling of the Ukraine crisis. And you can speak to almost any member of Congress on this issue, and they would be full of praise for the British stance and British leadership here. And how important do you think that Brexit and the fact that the UK is no longer shackled to the European Union, how important do you think that has been in terms of this perhaps resurgence of British leadership on not only the European stage but the world stage as well? It's a much more self-confident Britain in many respects right now.
I think that's a fair comment, and I think it reflects if you think about the Prime Minister's position on leaving the European Union, I think it reflects exactly sort of the substance of his view was always about. This was about the United Kingdom being globally outward looking and not just being focused as part of the EU, but having a partnership with our friends and our allies and neighbours in the EU, but also more widely across the world. And the ability for the UK to move back to over history what we have done, which is, have that drive and impact around the world and aim to do so in a very positive way, whether it's around free trade, and global rights and the rights of democracy, which is what we're talking about with Ukraine. This is about the defence of a sovereign democratic nation and supporting that. And I do think the Prime Minister has handled this superbly well. I think we've been very well served by the work across both the Foreign Secretary, the Defence Secretary. Particularly, he was very, very forward-leaning about making sure that we were putting support for defensive weaponry things into Ukraine very early on, and the Prime Minister has been absolutely at the forefront of this, as he was when, I think one of the things we forget is it's only a few years ago where we had the atrocious attack at Salisbury from the Russian state, and it was the Prime Minister who was Foreign Secretary at that time, worked to bring the world together to show its outrage and respond to Putin's regime over that. And I think he's shown that strength of character again in how he's driven things forward internationally and with partners.
Yes, and it is significant, as you pointed out, that the British were supplying the Ukrainians with defensive weaponry right at the beginning of the crisis, which began March last year.
And I'll go further.
Yes.
No, not just the UK, yes, the UK, but very much Northern Ireland.
Yes.
And one of the things that did get coverage, I think people in Northern Ireland are very proud of, is the NLAW is the code name for the product that's made just on the outskirts of Belfast. So Northern Ireland very much playing its part as a high-tech area that has a role in the defence industry, and is very much, there's a little bit of Belfast everywhere, and even in the defence of Ukraine.
It's great to hear, and I think that in many respects, Britain is now the biggest adversary for the Russians in Europe, and clearly, I think that Putin has found in Brexit Britain a very strong foe, and the UK has been at the forefront of rallying, I think, European efforts, and that is greatly to the credit of the United Kingdom. And talking of the current situation in Europe. The French President Emmanuel Macron has talked in recent days once again about the creation of a sort of grand European Union army, and he has made every effort to utilize the Ukraine crisis to advance a sort of Euro-federalist agenda, and talking about the need for Europe to have its own military identity and to no longer rely, if necessary, upon NATO or the United States. And so this is the message coming from France, which very interesting timing in terms of Macron's comments here. But it strikes me that this approach from the French actually only, in fact, perhaps works to the benefit of Putin, because a proposal for a European Union army would actually split the NATO alliance right down the middle, and would deeply divide, for example, Western European countries from Eastern European countries on this issue. The Poles, the Baltic states, for example, have been nervous actually about the creation of a European Union army and the impact it would have upon NATO in taking away scarce resources there. What's your view of what Macron is talking about here? It's certainly raising also concern here in Washington, especially among US conservatives, about possibly eroding the future of the NATO alliance rather than bringing it together at a time when NATO needs to actively confront the Russian threat.
Well, look, I think if you delve into this and your point, Niall, about some people's view of how this is part of a federal Europe program, I know that even when we're in the European Union, the idea of, for many people who were very pro leaving the European Union in the UK, it was the ability to not be part of a federal Europe that was part of it. And I think the challenges with that are the impact that has, and again, this comes back to this point, this is about sovereignty. we are defending Ukraine's democratic sovereignty in the same way that any sovereign state wants to defend its own democratic existence and ability. Certainly for us in the UK, and I know for many people who voted to leave the European Union, it was about pulling back and taking ownership of our own sovereignty. And the problem with a federal structure, I would argue, just as a concept, is in order for that to really work, you have to give up a lot more of the sovereignty than many states would ever be prepared to do. So I think there's a real challenge there, and as I say, but that's a matter for our partners in the EU. For me, and I think for the UK government, our position has always been we are very, very strong supporters of NATO. We've always played a very key role in NATO, both financially playing our part and morally and ideologically playing our part in NATO. And I think we're seeing the strength of NATO very much at the moment, actually, in terms of the way NATO has come together to show Putin that there is that kind of support. So I think from our point of view, our support will always be with NATO. And I think anything that risks damage to NATO that has been so successful for so long in terms of the reason and the concept that brought it together and how it's functioning, I think would be a mistake. And I think we should all be working to develop NATO to continue to be the defensive alliance that it has so successfully been. And I think that's the most powerful message we can give to Putin's regime, is that we're not going to be shied away from doing the right thing and making sure that we ensure that Putin ultimately does fail.
Yes, absolutely, and it is the courage and bravery of the Ukrainian people at this time is absolutely,
I mean, one of the
phenomenal
things
to behold.
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate and humbled to be in the Houses of Parliament, the House of Commons, a week or so ago when President Zelensky made his address to the House of Commons, and he made an address here to Congress just, I think, in the last couple of days. And I saw the video of that, and it is so powerful to see somebody taking that leadership role, having the courage to stand by their convictions, to stand up for their people, beaming that straight into the heart of our democracy is a very clear reminder of that strength of character and that the sheer heroicism and courage the Ukrainian people and their leadership is showing is quite humbling, actually. Yes. And you can see that desire to stand by their country and defend their country is palpable, and to be, as I say, admired, but it's quite humbling as well.
Yes, and it is striking how frequently Zelensky refers to Churchill and takes inspiration from Churchill's fight against Nazi Germany in World War II as a role model for his leadership, and clearly Mrs. Zelensky is inspired by what Britain is doing as well in support of the Ukrainian people.
Yeah, he's been very generous in his comments around the Prime Minister and what the UK has done. Obviously, we're working with our partners. It's in all our interests to work together, as I say, to ensure, as the Prime Minister's outlined, that Putin does ultimately fail. Because I think that the risk for the Western world of anything else is dire. And the idea that somebody can behave in the kind of heinous way with the abhorrent crimes we're seeing in terms of the way the invasion's been handled and the invasion in itself at all and starting this war, Putin has to fail. And we have to stay united to ensure that that's the outcome.
Absolutely. We are facing monstrous evil and barbarism in the form of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the free world has to remain united in the face of this evil.
Yeah, you've only got to see, I thought that the film that was shown into the Congress by Ukraine, by the President the other day, that shows the contrast of Ukraine as was and now Ukraine today, and the deaths and the murders of innocent civilians is just, it's barbaric and it's shocking.
Yes.
And it's right that NATO and the Western world stands up to that.
Absolutely. And in terms of the big picture for Brexit and also the US-UK special relationship, what do you see as the impact of Brexit upon the overall partnership with the United States? And also, what do you think the prospects are for a US-UK free trade agreement in the coming years between the world's largest and fifth largest economies? And of course, a lot of congressional focus on a US-UK trade deal at this time. Very strong support, of course, from US conservatives for a trade deal. And Brexit has been a very popular cause for American conservatives. Brexit is seen as embodying the same values of individual liberty, self-determination, sovereignty, and so on, that Americans, cherish deeply in their hearts.
Yeah, look, one of the things I've come to see actually since we've left the European Union is that very ability to be dexterous and faster, fleet of foot in the UK, to be able to move and to do things internationally and globally in a way that we just wouldn't be able to do if we were part of the European Union. Actually, our vaccine rollout is a really good example of the speed with which we've been able to move and to develop things and get that vaccine rollout as we've come through COVID. Moving is just one example of that, but our role on the world stage, I think, is another. I think there is a real opportunity for the UK and the US, where we have massive trade between us already, to develop that as free trading nations, free trading democracies around the world. I think that's a very, very good message to show people. I think it's really good. We've got the trade dialogue next week. The Trade Secretary, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, will be coming over next week for that discussion, which is, I think, is really positive. And as I say, I think that's a positive thing to do. And I think, again, it's one of those things that for free trading nations, the more we can do on that, the better. And again, having the position that the UK has, both in terms of rule of law, language, our position on the world's time clock, we do have a free trade deal with the EU, so we are in a perfect position to be able to be a fantastic trading partner for people around the world, and particularly our friends and long-term allies in the US. And you mentioned another special relationship, which is lasted for what seems forever, founded not just in the personal relationships between presidents and prime ministers, but also the defence and security of our nations. I've been fortunate enough in jobs that I've had in government before as policing minister, as security minister, looking at how we work with Europol and where the Americans have a presence now and have done for a while, and Interpol, and at that level, how important that relationship is for our countries. And I think the more we bolster that and show that free trade actually delivers a better opportunity and growth for people, the better message that is to the whole world, that free trade and open democracies is the way forward.
A question about energy security, and the Prime Minister has been very vocal on this issue in the last few days, and I think he had an article in the Daily Telegraph about it just a few days ago. And it is absolutely astonishing that so many European countries have become energy dependent upon the Russians in particular. And Germany, for example, derives about 55% of its energy supplies from Russia. And the Prime Minister made the point that Europe needs to really wake up on this and become energy independent, and that the free world has to really ensure that it is not held hostage or held to ransom by dictatorial regimes. And I think that for many decades, some of the big powers in Europe, frankly, have been held hostage by the huge dependence upon Russia, and Germany in particular. Its own policies have been shaped, even dictated in many ways by this dependence upon Russia, and the Germans are now starting to sort of wake up to that reality in the wake of the Ukraine crisis. Could you talk a bit about the Prime Minister's message on this, and the need for Europe really to change its overall approach on energy security?
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, in the UK, as you say, compared to some of our neighbours, we're somewhat less dependent on Russian energy than, as I say, some of our neighbours. And I think, look, from the Prime Minister's point of view, and you'll have to excuse me, I'm going to take this a little bit parochial as well, in the sense of both Northern Ireland and my own constituency of Great Yarmouth in Norfolk, actually, in terms of energy security, because I think there's an opportunity as well. And one of the things the Prime Minister has always been very, very keen on and open about is when we're even looking at net zero, is how that creates opportunity. I mean, becoming more energy efficient is good for the UK economy in the sense of we would like to think and argue we can be world leaders in renewable energy that gives us more independence and security of energy. And the reason I mentioned taking it parochial is Great Yarmouth, my constituency. We have proximity to the South North Sea, where we've obviously got energy stores as well that can be tapped into, but we also have got and are becoming an expert area, particularly for servicing for and delivery in the offshore renewable sector. And there is huge opportunity there. And in Northern Ireland, roughly 50% of all Northern Ireland's energy now is derived from renewable sources. About 70% of that is actually from wind technology. And we're seeing, and one of the things I'm looking at how the government can support is the development of green hydrogen as well. So all of these things that play a part in the net zero work, which is good for our environment, also play a part in how we deliver more energy security. But I think it is important across both food security, which I think will become a bigger issue through the course of this year with the rising costs as well, and energy security, that we are all looking at how we can be less reliant on dictatorial regimes and more self-reliant for energy. And I think both from a security point of view, but also from a cost point of view, and if we get it right, that's economic opportunity and more jobs and a growing economy as well. So you can, if we get this right, and what the Prime Minister's focused on in the UK is doing this in a way that creates the security, but also is growing our economy. So you get that very positive circle of movement going.
And just one last question with regard to the future of Britain's Conservatives. And Brandon, you served as chairman of the Conservative Party for a while, and you know the Conservative Party extremely well. And we recently also hosted Oliver Dowden, the present chairman of the Conservative Party. And there's a big debate, I think, among British Conservatives about the future direction that the Conservative Party is taking as the oldest, most successful political party in the world.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of debate about returning to Thatcherite roots in many respects, and with a far greater emphasis on tax cuts, economic freedom, reducing the role of big government, perhaps increasing levels of defence spending, which is something that Liz Truss alluded to in an article in the Financial Times, I think, last weekend. She pointed out that during the Cold War, British defence spending was around 5% of GDP. It's now around 2%. And do you think that for Britain's Conservatives, they are going to be adopting increasingly Thatcherite positions on a wide range of issues in the coming months and years, as many within the party are calling for?
Well, I'm smiling because you're someone who's a sort of child of the Thatcher era, and I can still vaguely remember I was very, very young, being with my parents on the night that Margaret Thatcher won that general election in 1979. I was only in single digits, just to be clear, of age then, but I do still vaguely remember the celebrations and what she brought. And look, my grandparents were able to buy their own home and become shareholders and part of a free market economy because of what Margaret Thatcher did. My family wouldn't be in the position we're in today if it wasn't for the reforms that she brought in. And there's a whole generation of politicians, I think, now, and people who are coming of age who have gone through that experience. Not only that, but she was Chancellor of my university and gave me my degree. So I have that very fond memory as well. But look, I think, obviously for the Conservative Party, and yes, look, I was chairman for a fair while during Theresa May's time. I think the party is in a very, very strong place. Where our membership has grown, and it grew hugely in the period I was there, and it's large. We've got our spring conference actually today, with the Prime Minister and colleagues speaking at that while I'm sitting here. I think we're in a very strong place, and I think people are, a particular time where we're seeing the pressure that we're seeing globally and the kind of actions that somebody like Putin can take, that reminder of the importance of freedom and democracy, the importance of us as individuals having that power to make decisions for ourselves and to spend as much of the money in our pocket ourselves, and government to trust people as we have done. And one of the reasons why I think we've been successful as a growing economy as we've come out of COVID, one of, if not the fastest, arguably growing in the G7, is we freed up earlier. We trusted people to make the right decisions with all of the information and the guidance, but trust people to make those decisions. And it's that kind of spirit that I think puts the UK in good stead, and I think is why the people of the UK will continue to support the Conservative Party. And I suspect that the next general election will be voting for Conservatives and voting for Boris Johnson as Prime Minister successfully.
Well, Brandon, thank you very much for a tremendous discussion today. And this is really an extremely important time for British leadership on the world stage, for American leadership, and for the leadership of the free world in the face of those who seek to tear it down. And without a doubt, I think the British have been at the forefront of standing up for liberty and freedom on the world stage. And certainly, I think the Russians are taking note of that to their cost in many respects. And And I hope that the Prime Minister continues to, to project and demonstrate this tremendously strong leadership at this time of immense crisis in Europe, and the biggest crisis Europe has faced since World War II. And thank you very much for all the work that you do on the Northern Ireland front, and an issue of, I think, significant importance, not only for the British people, but also here for millions of Americans as well, who take a very close interest. So most grateful to you for sharing all of your insights and some very challenging, tough questions as well. And we very much look forward to, working with you closely in the coming months and years, and hopefully you'll visit us again very soon. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you.